So tonight we're going to talk about one of history's most romanticized and deeply misunderstood figures, the Victorian housewife. You've probably seen her in paintings and novels, the perfect angel in the house, gliding through her spotless home, arranging flowers, and being a beacon of moral purity for her family. She's serene, she's gentle, and she makes it all look so effortless. But trust me, the reality was less about domestic bliss and more about being the unpaid, overworked CEO of a small, chaotic business where your employees might be stealing from you. Your budget is always on the verge of collapse, and one bad dinner party could tank your husband's career and ruin your family's reputation forever. It was a job with impossibly high stakes and absolutely no days off. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm always super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's just wild to me to see this little corner of sleepy history reach all over the globe. All right, find that cozy spot. Pull up that blanket and let your body just sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to Victorian England, but this time, you're not a young debutante looking for a husband. You've already got one, and you're about to find out that marriage isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a whole new kind of hardship. Congratulations. You just woke up as Mrs. Jonathan Watson. It is a damp, gray Tuesday in London, sometime around 1875. The first thing you feel is the cold. Not just a simple chill in the air, but a deep, seeping dampness that seems to be radiating from the very walls of the room. It clings to the heavy velvet curtains, the thick wool blankets, and your own skin. You're lying in an enormous four-poster bed, the kind you only read about in novels, but the grandness of it offers no comfort. The mattress is stuffed with horsehair, unforgiving and lumpy beneath you, and the sheets feel impossibly frigid. You lie perfectly still, afraid to move and disturb the pocket of slight warmth your body has created. Beside you, a man you've known for all of 6 months is sleeping soundly. Jonathan, your husband. His breathing is a deep, steady rhythm in the quiet room. The romance novel ended the moment he started snoring on your wedding night. Your eyes drift open and take in your new surroundings. This isn't your childhood bedroom, with its familiar patterns on the wallpaper, and the way the morning light used to hit the floor. This room is a stranger. It's vast, with a ceiling so high it seems to gather shadows in its corners. The furniture is dark, imposing mahogany, a hulking wardrobe, a dressing table laden with silver-backed brushes you're not used to, 2 stern-looking armchairs. Everything smells faintly of old wax, coal dust, and his cologne sandalwood. This is your home now, but it doesn't feel like a home. It feels like a museum you've been accidentally locked in overnight. This is the master bedroom of his house, your husband's house, a place that is now, technically, yours to manage. A wave of panic, cold as the room itself, washes over you. You are the mistress here. You are in charge. The thought is so overwhelming, it makes you want to pull the heavy blankets over your head and pretend you're still a girl in your father's house with no responsibilities beyond practicing the piano and avoiding your mother's criticisms. Too late for that. Your name isn't even the same. You are Mrs. Watson now. The old you, the girl who had her own thoughts and her own small, private world. She disappeared the moment you said, "I do." A soft, hesitant knock comes at the door. You don't answer, but it opens anyway. A young woman in a maid's uniform, her face pale and tired, slips into the room. She moves with a practiced silence, careful not to wake the sleeping man in the bed. She carries a brass can of hot water, which she pours into the ceramic basin on the washstand, the steam rising in a small, hopeful cloud. "Good morning, ma'am," she whispers, her eyes darting nervously from you to your husband. Her name is Sarah. You think. You're still learning the names of the dozen servants who now look to you for orders. "Shall I lay out the Navy Day dress?" she asks. You nod, because you have no idea what else to do. You're the mistress, but she knows the routines of this house far better than you do. She knows which dress is for mornings, which is for making calls, which is for dinner when you have no guests. She knows which floors creak and which doors stick. Right now, she holds all the power, and you are the imposter. As you slip out of bed, your bare feet meeting the shock of an ice-cold wooden floor, Sarah turns to help you. The ritual of getting dressed, which in your old life was a simple matter, is now a complex, hour-long operation. First, the SH-me's, then the stockings held up with garters, and then the corset. Sarah wraps it around your waist and begins to pull the laces. You grip the bedpost for support as she cinches it tight, compressing your ribs, squeezing your breath away. It's a familiar torture, but here in this new house, it feels different. It's no longer your mother's expectations you're being molded to fit. It's your husband's. You are being shaped, literally, into the form of a proper wife. After the petticoats, the bustle pad, and finally the heavy wool of the dress, you feel encased. Trapped. The weight of the clothes is a constant reminder of your new station. You can't move freely. You can't bend easily. You can't even take a full, deep breath. You can't help but feel you're putting on armor, or maybe a cage, preparing for a day of confinement. Downstairs, the house is cold and silent. Servants glide through the hallways like ghosts, dusting, polishing, their movements creating the illusion that the house runs itself. In the dining room, breakfast is laid out with terrifying precision. A single place setting for you at one end of a long, gleaming table. Your husband has already eaten and left for his work in the city. He's a banker, you remember. Deals with other people's money. He left without waking you, without a word. The head housemaid, Mrs. Gable, a stern woman whose expression suggests she has never smiled in her life, appears at your side as you take your seat. She places a heavy ring of iron keys on the table beside your plate. "The household keys, ma'am," she says, her voice as starched as her apron. The cook is waiting for today's menu, The butcher will be here at 10 for his order, and there's a problem with the new scullery maid. She broke a plate yesterday. You stare at the keys. They seem impossibly heavy. Each key represents a door, a room, a cupboard you are now responsible for. The pantry, the wine cellar, the linen closets. These keys are your crown and your shackle. They are the symbol of your authority as mistress of the house, but they also represent a mountain of duties you have no idea how to perform. The cook is waiting for a menu. You can barely cook an egg. The butcher needs an order. You wouldn't know a cut of beef from a side of mutton. And the scullery maid broke a plate. What are you supposed to do about that? You realize with a jolt that your education, French, watercolor painting, a little poetry, has prepared you for absolutely none of this. You were trained to be a decorative object in a drawing room, not the manager of a complex domestic operation with staff, budgets, and crises. Of course, Mrs. Gable, you hear yourself say, your voice sounding much calmer than you feel. I will speak with the cook directly after breakfast. You have no idea what you're going to say to the cook. As you sip your tea, your hand resting near the cold iron of the keys, the truth of your new life settles in. The wedding was the ceremony, but this is the reality. Your very own gilded cage. And those keys, they're not to doors that let you out. They're to the doors that lock you in. The honeymoon is most definitely over. You take a deep, unsteady breath, or as deep as your corset will allow, and pick up the heavy iron ring of keys. They jingle with a sound that is supposed to signify authority, but to you, it sounds like the rattling of chains. Your first test is the cook. Mrs. Gable is waiting by the dining room door, her posture an unspoken judgment. You make your way out of the formal, silent dining room and follow her toward the back of the house. The change in atmosphere is immediate. The polished wood and quiet carpets of the family areas give way to worn stone floors and a rising hum of activity. This is the engine room of the domestic ship, and you are the captain who doesn't know how to read a map. The kitchen door swings open, and the air hits you first, a wall of heat thick with the smell of boiling laundry from the scullery, beef stock simmering on the massive coal-fired range, and the sharp, clean scent of scrubbed stone. The clatter of pots is a constant, frantic symphony. A young maid scurries past with a tray, her head bowed, avoiding eye contact. Another is on her hands and knees, blacking the stove with a brush, her knuckles raw and red. And there, in the center of it all, is the cook. She is a large, formidable woman with broad shoulders, a face flushed permanently red from the heat of the range, and a dusting of flour across her apron like a badge of honor. She doesn't stop her work as you approach, continuing to chop vegetables on a massive wooden block with a speed and ferocity that makes you fear for her fingers. Cook, you begin, your voice sounding small and thin in the noisy room. I've come to discuss the menu for the day. You've chosen the name Mrs. Higgins for her in your mind. It sounds suitably no nonsense. She pauses her chopping for a fraction of a second, her knife hovering over a carrot, Yes, ma'am. What are your wishes? Your mind goes completely blank. What do respectable people eat on a Tuesday? Your own meals have always just appeared. You have no idea what is in season, what meat is available from the butcher, or how long it takes to prepare anything. You grasp for the first respectable sounding meal you can think of. A roast, I think. A roast of beef with potatoes, and perhaps a suet pudding for dessert. Mrs. Higgins sets down her knife. She wipes her hands on her apron, a slow, deliberate movement. We had roast on Sunday, ma'am, she says, her tone perfectly polite, yet carrying the weight of an unassailable fact. And the beef delivery isn't until Thursday. We have mutton today, or the leftover fowl from yesterday's luncheon. Your heart sinks a little. A blunder on your very first order. You've just revealed your utter incompetence to the one person whose cooperation you desperately need. She is not just challenging your command. She is pointing out that you don't even know the basic logistics of your own household. Of course, you say quickly, trying to recover. The mutton, then, that would be perfect. Mrs. Higgins gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. And for the vegetables, ma'am, we've carrots and turnips. The greens from the market this morning were not fresh enough for my liking. She is telling you what the menu will be, not asking. A small, bitter part of you realizes you have no real power here at all. The cook and the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, they run this house. You are merely a figurehead, a necessary piece of the domestic puzzle whose primary job is to not get in the way. Carrots and turnips will be fine, you say, your voice barely a whisper. You feel your cheeks burn with humiliation. Very good, ma'am, the cook says, and turns back to her chopping, the rhythm of her knife on the block, a clear dismissal. Your meeting is over. Before you can make your escape, Mrs. Gable clears her throat from behind you. And about the scullery maid, ma'am, the broken plate. Right, your next duty, disciplinarian. You follow Mrs. Gable into the scullery, a small, steamy room off the kitchen that is even hotter and damper. Here, a young girl, no older than 14, is washing a mountain of pots in a huge stone sink. Her name is Agnes. Her face is smudged with soot, and her eyes are red-rimmed from crying. Agnes, Mrs. Gable says, her voice sharp as broken glass. The mistress wishes to speak with you. The girl turns, curtsying so low her head almost touches her knees. She keeps her eyes fixed on the floor, trembling slightly. Part of you wants to tell her it's okay, that a plate is just a plate. But you can hear Mrs. Gable's silent disapproval, feel the weight of your expected role. A mistress must maintain discipline. Laxity with one servant could lead to insubordination from them all. You broke a plate yesterday, you state, trying to sound as authoritative as you imagine your mother would. Yes, ma'am. It had slipped from my hands. I'm ever so sorry, ma'am, the girl sniffles. The cost of the plate will be docked from your wages, you say, the words feeling foreign and cruel in your mouth. Her wages are probably a few shillings a week, barely enough to send a pittance home to her family. cost of a single plate might be an entire day's earnings. Agnes looks up, her eyes wide with panic. "Please, ma'am, my mother." "That will be all, Agnes," Mrs. Gable cuts in, saving you from having to respond. "Return to your work." As you turn and walk away, you can feel the girl's despair like a physical blow. You've just performed your first act as mistress, and it was an act of casual cruelty, enforcing a system you don't even believe in. You retreat upstairs, the cold iron keys feeling heavier than ever against the fabric of your dress. The quiet elegance of the drawing room feels like a lie. The real life of this house, the heat and the sweat and the struggle, all happens downstairs, managed by women whose names your husband will likely never bother to learn. You sink into one of the stiff, ornate chairs and stare at your gloved hands. You haven't managed a thing. You were told what to serve for dinner by your cook and told how to punish a servant by your housekeeper. You are the mistress of this house in name only, a puppet propped up to maintain appearances while the real work is done by others. And you have to do this every day, for the rest of your life. The thought is so suffocating. You feel the corset tighten around your ribs, a perfect metaphor for the gilded cage you now call home. You retreat from the servant's domain, the sting of your humiliation still fresh. Your authority has been tested and found wanting, not through open rebellion, but through the quiet, unassailable competence of your staff. They know their roles, and you, the mistress, are the only one who is dangerously out of your depth. You find yourself in the morning room, a small, feminine space designated for letter writing and other suitably delicate activities. It is here that your next, and perhaps most daunting, task awaits you. It sits on a delicate rosewood desk, the household account book. It doesn't look like a weapon, but you sense that it is. Bound in dark green leather, its pages filled with the spidery, judgmental handwriting of Jonathan's late mother. This book is the true ledger of your success or failure as a wife. This is the gospel of domesticity, and you are its new, unprepared priestess. Your husband earns the money. That is his sphere. But your sphere, the domestic one, is to transform that money into a functioning, respectable household. It is your job to perform the daily miracle of turning his pounds and shillings into hot meals, clean linens, warmed rooms, and the all-important appearance of effortless prosperity. It is, you realize, the work of a penny-pinching angel, and failure is a sin. With trembling fingers, you open the book. The pages are a dizzying landscape of columns and figures. Coal, candles, soap, starch, meat, flour, sugar, servant wages, repairs. The list of expenditures is endless. Your mother-in-law was a meticulous bookkeeper. Every half penny is accounted for, every purchase justified with a neat, spiky note in the margin. Your task is to review last week's spending and plan for the week ahead. It's not just bookkeeping, it's an audit. You are looking for waste, for extravagance, for any sign that the ship of this household is taking on water. You start with the butcher's bill, It seems shockingly high. You feel a surge of suspicion. Is the butcher overcharging? Is Mrs. Higgins, the cook, being wasteful? And then, a wave of self-doubt. Who are you to question her? She who can command a kitchen with the authority of a general, while you can barely decide on mutton. You make a small, timid note in the margin. Query cost of beef. It feels like a tiny act of rebellion. Next, you look at the entry for coal. The cost is staggering. You now understand why the house is always so cold in the mornings. Heat is a luxury, an expense to be carefully managed. The few logs burning in the drawing room grate are not for comfort, they are for show. The true temperature of your family's prosperity is measured by how much coal Jonathan can afford and how skillfully you can avoid using it. And then there are the costs that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with performance. Flowers for the parlor, new calling cards for you and your husband, wax for sealing letters, ribbons for mending a dress. These are not frivolities. In the brutal calculus of Victorian society, they are essential business expenses. They are the small, constant investments required to maintain your family's precarious foothold in the middle class. Your husband spoke to you once, in a rare moment of candidness during your courtship, about the terror of debt. It's not just a financial state, he explained, but a moral one. Debt is a sign of poor character, of a failure to live within one's means. It leads to whispers, to social exclusion, and for the unlucky, to the debtor's prison or the workhouse. His words echo in your mind as you stare at the page. This isn't just about balancing a budget. It's about staving off social ruin. It's a tightrope walk over a canyon of disgrace. And you're the one holding the balancing pole. A sharp knock at the morning room door makes you jump. It's Sarah, the young maid. The grocer is here for his payment, ma'am, she announces. This is it. Your first direct financial transaction as mistress. You take a few coins from the cash box, your heart pounding foolishly. The grocer, a stout man with a flour-dusted mustache, is waiting in the hall. He bows, but there's a condescending smirk in his eyes as he hands you the bill. He's dealt with your mother-in-law for years. He knows a novice when he sees one. You scan the bill, your eyes moving over the items: flour, sugar, tea, jams. You remember Jonathan's mother's spiky handwriting. Always check the arithmetic. You force yourself to add the figures in your head. And there it is. A small discrepancy. He has overcharged you by tuppence for the sugar. It's a tiny amount, almost nothing. But it feels like a test. Will you notice? Will you dare to say anything? Excuse me, you say, your voice steadier than you feel. I believe there is a small error in the total. The grocer's smirk falters. He takes the bill, his eyes scanning it. Ah, so there is. My apologies, ma'am. A slip of the pen. He corrects the figure, his tone now carrying a new note of respect. You pay him the correct amount. The clink of the coins on the hall table sounding like a declaration of victory. It's a small triumph, almost laughably small, but it's yours. You didn't just hand over the money. You audited, you questioned, you asserted your authority. As you close the heavy front door behind him, you feel a surge of pride, ridiculously out of proportion to the accomplishment. 2 pence. You saved the household 2 pence. You return to the desk and the leather-bound account book. It still looks intimidating, but slightly less so. You dip your pen in the inkwell and make your first official entry as Mrs. Watson, your handwriting clear and firm. Paid grocer. Corrected overcharge on sugar, saving 2 pence. It's not much, but in the silent, relentless war of domestic management, you have just won your first tiny battle. A week later, you are faced with a new kind of terror. Jonathan informs you over breakfast, in his usual offhand manner, that he has invited his senior partner and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Croft, to dinner on Friday. Just a small, simple affair, my dear, he says, before disappearing behind his newspaper. Your blood runs cold. A simple affair. There is no such thing as a simple affair in Victorian London. A dinner party is not a meal, it is a battle. It is a meticulously planned and brutally judged theatrical performance, and you, as the hostess, are the director, producer, and lead actress. Your entire family's reputation rests on your shoulders. A single misstep, undercooked fish, lukewarm soup, a clumsy servant, a dull conversation could signal social incompetence, damaging Jonathan's career and marking your household as second-rate. The moment he leaves for the bank, the house explodes in a controlled panic orchestrated by you. Your first challenge is the menu. This isn't just a matter of deciding what to eat. The menu is a complex code, a public declaration of your family's taste, wealth, and social standing. It must be French, of course. Everything fashionable is French. You spend an entire morning with Mrs. Higgins, the cook, and a borrowed copy of Mrs. Beeton's book of household management, the terrifyingly comprehensive Bible of domesticity. The conversation is less a collaboration and more a tense negotiation. Aspic, you suggest timidly, pointing to a particularly intimidating recipe. It sounds very elegant. Mrs. Higgins sniffs. Aspic is a gamble, ma'am. If the weather is warm, it won't set. We could end up serving fish-flavored jelly. Might I suggest a clear turtle soup instead? Much more reliable. Once again, you are reminded that she is the expert and you are the amateur. You defer to her on the turtle soup, feeling the familiar sting of incompetence. The final menu is a 7-course monster. Soup, fish, a meat and tray, a roast, a game course, several puddings, and a savory to finish. It is an undertaking of military complexity, requiring 3 days of preparation and a budget that makes you wince as you approve it in the account book. Next comes the guest list, the seating chart, and the invitations, all of which are their own special form of torture. The seating chart is a political minefield. The most important male guest, Mr. Croft, must sit to your right. The most important female guest, Mrs. Croft, to Jonathan's right. You then have to arrange the other guests, a respectable solicitor and his wife, and a dull but well-connected cousin in a way that respects rank, avoids known rivalries, and promotes, God-willing, pleasant conversation. You spend an hour moving names around on a piece of paper like a desperate general planning an impossible attack. The day of the dinner arrives, and the house hums with a frantic, suppressed energy. You are everywhere at once, supervising the polishing of the silver again, inspecting the ironing of the tablecloth, and arranging the floral centerpiece yourself, because Sarah, the maid, has no feel for aesthetics. Your nerves are stretched as taut as the strings of a violin. By 6 o'clock, you must retreat to begin your own preparations, leaving the chaos downstairs in the hands of Mrs. Higgins and Mrs. Gable. The transformation into the serene hostess takes 2 hours and the help of your maid, Sarah. You are laced into your tightest evening corset, squeezing your waist to an impossibly small size. The gown is deep crimson silk, a color chosen to project confidence you absolutely do not feel. Your hair is swept up in an elaborate arrangement of curls and braids that feels heavy and precarious. When you descend the stairs at 7:45, you are no longer Elizabeth Watson, a terrified young woman drowning in domestic responsibility. You are Mrs. Watson, the calm, elegant mistress of the house. It is the performance of a lifetime. Jonathan greets you at the bottom of the stairs, looking handsome in his evening attire. "You look magnificent, my dear," he whispers, offering you his arm. There's a flicker of pride in his eyes that gives you a much-needed sliver of courage. The guests arrive. The polite greetings, the exchange of pleasantries, the careful dance of social etiquette unfolds exactly as rehearsed. In the drawing room before dinner, you make small talk, your mind racing through a checklist. Is the fire burning correctly? Are the lamps trimmed to the perfect brightness? Will the new footman Jonathan hired for the evening remember not to pour the wine with his thumb on the neck of the bottle? At dinner, you take your seat at the head of the table, smiling graciously as if you haven't spent the last 3 days in a state of mortal terror. You steer the conversation, gently drawing out the shy solicitor's wife, laughing at Mr. Croft's ponderous jokes, and ensuring everyone feels included. You eat almost nothing, your corset making more than a few delicate bites impossible, but you move food around your plate to create the illusion of dining. Disaster strikes during the fish course. The new footman, a gangly boy named Thomas, trips on the edge of the rug and sends a tureen of sauce cascading onto Mrs. Croft's lap. The table falls silent. Mrs. Croft lets out a small gasp, staring at the stain spreading across her expensive silk gown. In that moment, your social future hangs by a thread. This is the kind of incident that people will whisper about for months. The Watsons' disastrous dinner party. But then something inside you clicks into place. You rise from your chair, calm and in command. "Oh, you poor dear," you exclaim, rushing to Mrs. Croft's side with your napkin. "How dreadful for you. Thomas, fetch a damp cloth and some salt at once." "Sarah, please escort Mrs. Croft to my room so she may freshen up." You manage the crisis with such swift, composed efficiency that there's no time for awkwardness to settle. By the time Mrs. Croft returns, the stain mostly faded and her dignity restored. The conversation has already been smoothly restarted by Jonathan, who has followed your lead. You catch his eye across the table, and he gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. It's more than approval, it's respect. The rest of the dinner proceeds flawlessly. The food is exquisite, the service mostly perfect, the conversation sparkling. After the ladies withdraw, leaving the men to their port and politics, Mrs. Croft takes your hand. "My dear Mrs. Watson," she says, her earlier coolness replaced with genuine warmth. "You handled that little mishap with such grace. Jonathan is a lucky man to have such a capable wife." Later that night, after the guests have departed and the house is quiet again, you and Jonathan stand together in the now empty drawing room. "You were brilliant tonight, Elizabeth," he says, his voice quiet with an emotion you haven't heard before. "Truly, I was terrified," you admit, the mask of the serene hostess finally falling away. "No one would have known," he says, taking your hand. "You were the perfect wife, and for the first time, you don't feel like a prisoner in that role. You feel like a victor. You have faced the greatest trial a Victorian housewife can endure, and you have not only survived, you have triumphed. The dinner party was a performance, yes, but it was your performance. You were the one in control, the one who turned a near catastrophe into a social victory. You may be in a gilded cage, but tonight you learned that you can still be the one who sings the tune. The weeks following your successful dinner party are a blur of newfound confidence. Your position in the household, once a source of terror, has become manageable. Mrs. Higgins, the cook, treats you with a grudging respect. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, now presents problems with the assumption that you will, in fact, solve them. Even Jonathan's mother seems to have softened, her criticisms less frequent now that the Crofts have sung your praises throughout the neighborhood. You are settling into a rhythm. You are becoming a wife. And then, one chilly autumn afternoon, the fragile piece of your carefully managed world shatters. It starts with your son. Little Arthur, who is 4 years old and the center of your universe, is playing on the floor of the nursery with his wooden soldiers. He seems quieter than usual, his face flushed. When you place a hand on his forehead, it is burning hot. "It's just a chill," Jonathan says that evening, trying to soothe both you and himself. "He was playing in the garden yesterday. We'll give him some warm broth, and he'll be right as rain by morning." But he is. By morning, Arthur is delirious with fever. He cries weakly, his little body trembling. And then you see it, a faint, scarlet rash spreading across his chest. You've heard the whispers from other mothers, the hushed, terrified stories at tea parties. You know what this is. Scarlet fever, the disease that steals children from their beds in the middle of the night. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through you. This is the true test of a Victorian housewife, a test far greater than seating charts or balanced account books. This is a battle for your child's life, and you have no weapons. Germ theory is a new, controversial idea, barely whispered about in medical circles. Antibiotics are a fantasy from a future you cannot imagine. You send a footman to fetch Dr. Evans, the family physician. The wait for his arrival is an eternity. You sit by Arthur's bed, sponging his forehead with a cool cloth, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. You are a mother, helpless, watching her child suffer. Dr. Evans arrives, a stern man with a kind face and a leather bag that smells of carbolic acid and mystery. He examines Arthur, his expression grim. Yes, he confirms, it is the fever. We must be vigilant. His instructions are a terrifying glimpse into the medical ignorance of the age. Keep the windows sealed at all times, he orders. The night air is full of miasma, noxious vapors that can worsen the boy's condition. We must keep him warm and away from drafts. Keep the windows sealed. In your modern mind, you scream for fresh air, for ventilation to clear the germs. But in 1875, the very air is the enemy. The sick room, you are told, must become a sealed chamber, a fortress against the poisonous atmosphere outside. For the next week, the nursery becomes your entire world. You barely leave Arthur's side. The room is kept dark and stuffy, the air thick with the smell of sickness, and the vinegar-soaked cloths that are hung in an attempt to purify the miasma. You have no thermometer to measure the fever's progress. You can only judge it by the heat of his skin against your lips, by the frightening brightness of his eyes. You spoon-feed him beef tea and watered-down milk, praying he can keep it down. You change the sweat-soaked linens, your hands moving with a desperate, practiced efficiency. You read to him in a low, steady voice, hoping the sound of your presence can somehow tether him to the world of the living. This is your work now. Not managing servants or planning menus, but the raw, elemental work of caregiving. There is no social performance here, no pretense. There is only a mother's love and a deep, chilling fear. Jonathan is a ghost in this process. He hovers at the door, his face etched with worry, but he is a man. This is the woman's sphere. He can offer you a comforting word, a hand on your shoulder, but the long, dark hours of nursing fall to you, and you alone. Dr. Evans visits daily, his treatments a litany of well-intentioned but useless interventions. He prescribes small doses of mercury to clear the system and advises against giving the boy too much water, believing it could weaken his constitution. You follow his orders because he is the expert, the man of science. But a small, rebellious voice in the back of your mind, the voice of a future he cannot comprehend, screams that this is all wrong. On the 5th night, the fever peaks. Arthur is barely conscious, his breathing shallow and rapid. You sit in the dim, stuffy room, listening to the clock on the mantelpiece tick away the seconds of your son's life. This is it, the moment where it all turns. You fall to your knees beside the bed, your head bowed against the mattress, and you pray. You bargain with a God you're not sure you still believe in. You offer anything, everything, in exchange for your son's life. As dawn breaks, you feel a change. You reach out a trembling hand to Arthur's forehead. It's still hot, but the raging, dry heat has been replaced by a film of sweat. The fever has broken. He opens his eyes, and for the first time in days, they are clear. "Mama," he whispers, his voice weak as a kitten's. Tears you didn't even know you were holding back stream down your face as you gather him into your arms. He is light, too light, but he is alive. When Jonathan comes to the door that morning, he finds you both asleep in the armchair, Arthur curled against your chest, your cheek resting on his hair. He doesn't say a word, just quietly places another blanket over you both. You have won, for now. You have fought the fever with love and endurance and blind luck, and you have won. But as you hold your sleeping son, you understand a new, terrifying truth about your role. Being a Victorian housewife isn't just about managing a household. It's about being the last line of defense against a world full of invisible enemies, with nothing but your own two hands to protect the people you love. Arthur's recovery is slow, but steady. Within a few weeks, the color returns to his cheeks, and the nursery, once a sealed chamber of fear, is once again filled with the sound of laughter and scattered wooden soldiers. The household exhales. You have passed through the fire and emerged exhausted but intact. But the world does not stop for a mother's relief. The relentless machinery of Victorian social life has been waiting, and it is time for you to resume your duties. "Elizabeth, my dear," Jonathan says one morning, setting down a letter on the breakfast table. "Now that Arthur is well on the mend, we must begin to repay our social debts. Mrs. Croft has invited us to her at home on Thursday, and it would be most impolite to refuse. And at home, the Victorian equivalent of modern office hours, where a lady would designate one afternoon a week to receive visitors. It sounds simple enough, but you know it is another carefully choreographed performance. And more than that, Jonathan's words signal a return to your public role, a role that feels utterly alien after the raw, private intensity of nursing your son. "Of course, Jonathan," you say, the dutiful wife's response automatic on your lips. Before Thursday, however, you must make calls of your own. This is the currency of social life. A visit paid is a debt incurred. A visit received must be repaid promptly. It is your job, as the woman of the house, to manage this delicate social ledger. The ritual of preparing for social calls is as elaborate as dressing for a dinner party. You wear your visiting dress, a formal day gown of deep green silk, complete with a matching hat and pristine kid gloves. In your gloved hand, you carry a small, elegant card case. It contains your visiting cards and Jonathan. These small, engraved pieces of paper are your social passport. Without them, you are a nobody. Sarah, your maid, accompanies you, walking a respectful 2 paces behind, her presence a silent testament to your family's status. even a short walk to a neighbor's house is a public performance. Your posture must be perfect, your pace measured, your expression serene. You acknowledge acquaintances with a slight, gracious nod, never with a familiar smile. Your first call is on Mrs. Albright, the solicitor's wife you met at your dinner party. You arrive at her door at precisely 3 o'clock. Punctuality is not a suggestion. It is a moral imperative. Being too early suggests you have nothing better to do. Being late is an unforgivable insult. The maid takes your cards on a small silver tray. 1 of yours and 2 of Jonathan's, 1 for Mrs. Albright, 1 for her husband. This is the arcane algebra of card leaving. The maid returns. Mrs. Albright is at home, she announces. You are shown into a drawing room that is a near-perfect replica of your own, filled with heavy furniture and a suffocating number of decorative objects. Mrs. Albright rises to greet you, her smile as practiced as your own. The conversation that follows is a masterclass in polite nothingness. You discuss the weather unseasonably damp, mutual acquaintances, all in good health, thank heavens, and the sermon at church last Sunday, most uplifting. You are both exquisitely polite, and you learn absolutely nothing of substance about each other. It is a conversation designed to avoid any genuine connection, any hint of real emotion or opinion. After exactly 15 minutes, the prescribed length for a formal call, you rise to leave. It was so good of you to call, Mrs. Albright says. It was my pleasure, you reply. And that's it. You have successfully performed 1 unit of social obligation. Your next call is less successful. At Mrs. Gable's house, the maid informs you that her mistress is not at home. This is a polite fiction. You know for a fact that she is at home. You saw her in the window as you approached. Being not at home is the Victorian way of declining a visit without causing open offense. It is a social snub, a gentle but clear message that your visit is not desired at this time. Why, you spend the rest of the walk racking your brain. Did you say something wrong at your dinner party? Has Jonathan somehow offended Mr. Gable? Or is it something as simple as her having a headache and not wishing to receive guests? You will likely never know. You must simply accept the snub with grace and try again in a few weeks. The mental energy required to navigate these unspoken social codes is exhausting. Your final duty of the day is to leave a card at the Crofts' residence to confirm your attendance at home. This time, you don't ask to see Mrs. Croft. You simply hand the footman your card, the corner folded down, a subtle signal that you delivered it in person. The rules are endless, arcane, and utterly unforgiving. As you walk home, the weight of it all presses down on you. After the raw, life-and-death reality of Arthur's illness, this world of folded cards and polite fictions feels hollow, meaningless. This is what you were trained for, what your entire life as a woman has been building toward, to be a flawless performer in this elaborate, empty play. You can't help but think about the women who don't or can't play this game. The working women, the servants, the poor. Their lives are a constant struggle for physical survival. Your life is a constant struggle for social survival. Both are prisons, just with different kinds of bars. Yours are gilded, but they are bars nonetheless. When you return home, Jonathan has a guest in the drawing room, a business associate. He introduces you, and you perform your role as the charming wife, pouring tea, making polite conversation, and then discreetly excusing yourself, as is proper when men are discussing business. You retreat to the nursery, the one room in the house that feels truly yours. Arthur is awake now, building a lopsided tower with his blocks. He looks up and gives you a radiant, gap-toothed smile. "Mama," he says, holding up a block. You sink to the floor beside him, the heavy silk of your visiting dress rustling around you. You take the block, your gloved hand feeling clumsy next to his small, perfect fingers. In this room, with this child, the suffocating rules of the world outside fall away. Here, you are not Mrs. Watson, the performer of social duties. You are simply Mama. And for now, that is enough. The days settle back into their predictable, orderly rhythm. The household runs smoothly under your increasingly confident direction. Arthur is healthy and thriving. Your social calendar is full. By all external measures, you are a model of Victorian domestic success. Jonathan is pleased with you. His mother's criticisms have softened into grudging acceptance. You are, in the eyes of the world, a woman who has everything. But in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, when Jonathan's snores are a soft rumble beside you, a hollow ache settles in your chest. You feel a profound, inexpressible loneliness. Your life is a constant performance, a series of roles you play with flawless precision. The efficient household manager, the charming hostess, the dutiful wife, the devoted mother. But where, in all of this, is Elizabeth? The girl who loved to read not just poetry, but history and science. The young woman who once dreamed of seeing the world beyond London's foggy streets. She seems to have vanished, absorbed into the all-consuming identity of Mrs. Watson. Your days are filled with people, servants, tradesmen, social acquaintances, your own family. Yet you feel utterly alone. Your conversations are governed by propriety, your interactions dictated by duty. There is no one with whom you can share your true thoughts, your secret fears, your small, rebellious dissatisfactions. To do so would be unladylike, improper, a shocking breach of the serene facade you are required to maintain. Your relationship with Jonathan, while respectful and even affectionate, is a partnership of separate spheres. He returns from the city each evening, his mind full of the world of finance, politics, and business, a world from which you are entirely excluded. He tells you of his day, but in a simplified, edited way, as if explaining it to a child. It is not his fault. It is simply the way of the world. Men have public lives, women have private ones, and the two are not meant to intersect in any meaningful way. You try to read, to keep your mind engaged, but your days are so fragmented by domestic interruptions that you can barely get through a single chapter. And the books available to you are carefully censored. Jonathan's library is full of works on philosophy and economics, but those are considered unsuitable for the delicate female intellect. Your own small collection consists of sentimental novels and moral tracts, all reinforcing the virtues of piety, submission, and domesticity. Then there is the matter of your marital duty. It is the unspoken, unacknowledged core of your wifely existence. Jonathan is a considerate husband, not rough or demanding like the husbands of some women you know. But the act itself is performed in the dark, in silence, with a swift, perfunctory quality that leaves you feeling more like an object than a partner. There is no language for desire, no room for your own pleasure. The act is for procreation, for his release. Your role is to submit, to endure with quiet dignity. You do your duty, and in the silence that follows, the gulf between you feels wider than the space in the bed. This, you have been taught, is normal. This is marriage. To expect more would be unnatural, a sign of a depraved character. And so you say nothing. One rainy afternoon, you are in the nursery with Arthur, tidying his toys. You come across a box of his watercolor paints. On an impulse you don't fully understand, you take them, along with a sheet of his drawing paper, and retreat to the morning room. You close the door, a small act of defiance, and you begin to paint. You don't paint flowers or a pastoral landscape, the acceptable subjects for a lady artist. You paint the view from your window, the gray, wet London street, the blurred shapes of carriages, a lone figure huddled under an umbrella. You paint the feeling of it, the confinement, the melancholy, the muted, colorless reality of your world. The paint is cheap, the paper flimsy, but as you work, something inside you shifts. For the first time in months, you are not performing. You are creating. You are expressing a part of yourself that has been locked away, silenced by the endless demands of being Mrs. Watson. You lose track of time, absorbed in the simple act of mixing colors, of trying to capture the precise shade of a rain-slicked cobblestone. The door opens, and you jump, startled, trying to hide the painting. But it's Jonathan, home early from the bank. "Elizabeth," he asks, seeing your flushed face, the paint spread across the desk. "What is this?" He picks up the painting. You brace yourself for disapproval, for a gentle reminder that such serious pursuits are not for women. But his expression is one of surprise, and something else you can't quite read. "I didn't know you could paint," he says, his voice quiet. "I can't, not really," you stammer. "It's just a silly little sketch." "No," he says, his eyes fixed on the paper. "It's not silly. It's true. This is what it feels like, isn't it? Looking out at the world from inside." He understands. In that moment, he sees past the painting to the woman who created it. He sees your loneliness, your confinement, your unspoken yearning for something more. It is a moment of connection more profound than any you have shared in your marital bed. He looks from the painting to you, and his eyes are filled with a new, startling understanding. You should have proper supplies, he says. Good paper, real brushes. I'll see to it tomorrow. It is a small gesture, but it feels monumental. It is an acknowledgement of you, of Elizabeth, not just Mrs. Watson. It is permission, not just to paint, but to be. The next day, a package arrives from a fine arts supplier. Inside are brushes, professional-grade watercolors, thick, beautiful paper. There's no note, but none is needed. That evening, you don't join Jonathan in the drawing room after dinner. You retreat to the morning room, and with the door slightly ajar, you begin to paint again. You can hear the sounds of the house around you, the distant clatter from the kitchen, the ticking of the clock in the hall, Jonathan turning the pages of his newspaper in the next room. They are the sounds of your cage. But now, you have found a small, precious key. You may still be a prisoner of your time, your class, your gender. You may still have to perform the endless duties of a Victorian housewife. But in the quiet moments, with a brush in your hand and a blank page before you, you can be something more. You can be an artist. You can be yourself. And in the gilded cage of your life, you have finally found a window with a view. As the last brushstroke dries and the house settles into the quiet of the night, you step back and look at your work. It's just a small painting, a simple scene of a London street in the rain, but it's yours. It is a piece of your soul made visible, a testament to the woman who exists beneath the corset, behind the serene smile of Mrs. Watson. You glance at the clock. It is nearly midnight. Another day is done. Another series of performances successfully navigated. And tomorrow will bring more of the same: the menus, the account books, the social calls, the endless, grinding work of maintaining a respectable Victorian household. But as you blow out the lamp and make your way to your bedroom, you no longer feel the hollow ache of loneliness. You are still confined, still limited by the unyielding expectations of your world. But you have found a way to survive, not just by enduring, but by creating. You have discovered that even in the most restrictive of cages, the human spirit can find a way to be free. You close your eyes and let the sounds of the sleeping house fade away. As you drift off to sleep, let the image of that small painting stay with you. A reminder of the quiet strength, the hidden resilience, and the unspoken creativity of the millions of women who lived and endured within the gilded cage of Victorian domesticity. They were more than just angels in the house. They were survivors. They were artists. They were, in their own quiet way, revolutionaries. And now, you can rest, grateful for the freedoms they could only dream of, and for the simple, profound truth that even in the darkest room, it is possible to create your own light.